Today in our Route 66 journey through the Scriptures, we are now moving into the book of 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians tomorrow. These are the first books that Paul wrote, the first inspired letters that he writes, about 10 years before the prison epistles. He is writing to a church in Thessalonica. These are churches that are in the Macedonia area. And as he writes to them, he first of all is very excited about them. We find in chapter 1, verse 9, that they have truly been converted to Christ, and he knows that to be the case. Listen to what he says. For they themselves report about us what kind of a reception we had with you, and how you turned to God from idols to serve a living and true God. That's a picture of true conversion, folks, true salvation. Salvation is not believing certain facts about Jesus and the crucifixion. Salvation is a turning by faith alone to Jesus Christ. As this explains here, we used to worship other things. We worshiped all sorts of things, including self. Idols is mentioned here. Everything but Jesus Christ is idols. And so we're worshiping other things, but now we turned and we're serving a living and true God. These people were saved. They were marvelously saved, and Paul was excited about that. Then he moves immediately in verse 10 to his major theme. He says, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, that is Jesus Christ, who rescues us from the wrath to come. Paul is going to talk about the second coming and those related issues in every chapter in both 1 and 2 Thessalonians. This is his theme, the return of Christ. And so we see that, and all 8 chapters are going to deal with that particular issue. We're going to focus our attention in 1 Thessalonians on chapter 4 in what we will normally call the rapture. And we call this event that is being described here the rapture because down in verse 17, the English words caught up are in Latin rapture, and that's where we get our word rapture. Here he talks about to a church who is concerned that perhaps they have missed out on the return of Christ, that maybe Christ came secretly and they weren't ready or something, and they had missed out on the return of Christ, and they were in quite a quandary, especially since some of the believers had died, and they didn't know what had happened to them. So Paul writes to comfort them, and he does so in these verses. Look at verse 13 of chapter 4. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who are asleep, but we want you to know the truth, so that you will not grieve as do the rest who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven, now get the picture, with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore, comfort one another with these words. And so we have this picture of the Lord returning at what we call the rapture. He doesn't return at this point to the earth. I'll talk about that in 2 days. He doesn't return to the earth. He returns to the atmosphere, to the air, to the clouds. And those who are his, those Christians who are his, who have already died, will be resurrected from the grave and given new bodies, and they will join the Lord in the air. And believers who are still alive will be transformed and given new glorified bodies to meet the Lord in the air. No wonder he says, comfort one another with these words. But then he immediately moves into the day of the Lord in chapter 5. Now, as to the times and the epochs, brethren, you have no need for anyone to write anything to you, for you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. If you've been going along with us through our Route 66, you know that the day of the Lord is often a term used in the Old Testament to speak of judgment to come, followed eventually by blessing. So he says there is a day coming of judgment, and the Lord is going to come and judge those. But he says over in verse 9, for we have not been destined for wrath. So we're going to be spared this judgment because we're not destined for wrath. But the Lord is going to come one day in judgment upon the earth. We call this the second coming, and it's distinguished from the first coming, and we'll look at that a little closer in a couple of days. But I want to close with verse 11 today of chapter 5. Therefore, encourage one another and build up one another, just as you have been doing. That's our key verse, that we are to be encouraged by the truth of eschatology, doctrines of end things, the coming of Christ. These things should encourage us and build us up in Christ as we study them and learn more about them. Our key word for the book is going to be return. The return of Christ at the rapture. That will be our key word. Our key verse is 5:11. Tomorrow we'll look at 2 Thessalonians and what that has to add to this same topic.